When Grace married Daniel, she thought life had finally rewarded her with a fresh start. After years of enduring her stepmother Vivian's manipulative schemes, Grace had built a life filled with love and stability. Her wedding day was a fairy tale, but it also brought Vivian's unwelcome presence back into her life. Despite her better judgment, Grace allowed Vivian to stay in their guest house, hoping it would bridge the gap between them. Daniel, ever the gentleman, suggested they offer Vivian a chance to prove she had changed. Grace reluctantly agreed, unaware of the storm about to brew. Vivian's arrival was marked by her usual flair: designer luggage, perfectly coiffed hair, and an air of entitlement. She showered Grace and Daniel with sugary compliments, but Grace could see through the facade. Daniel, however, tried to see the best in everyone, including Vivian. Grace's heart sank as she realized her stepmother's antics might soon test her marriage. Vivian wasted no time inserting herself into their daily lives. She offered to help with house chores, bringing breakfast to the table and insisting on running errands for them. Grace, juggling a demanding job and newlywed life, found it hard to object, though the gesture felt hollow. "You deserve to be pampered," Vivian purred one evening, placing an elaborate meal before Daniel. "After all, a man who works so hard should be rewarded." Daniel chuckled, clearly amused by her flattery, while Grace's jaw tightened. Over time, Vivian's intrusions became less subtle. She found excuses to linger when Daniel was home, often engaging him in conversations about his work and interests. Grace couldn't shake the unease creeping into her heart. Was Vivian truly trying to mend fences, or was she spinning another web of deceit? Grace decided to keep a watchful eye, but she never anticipated the lengths Vivian would go to disrupt their lives. As days turned into weeks, Grace began to notice a troubling pattern. Vivian always seemed to position herself between her and Daniel, whether it was sitting too close on the couch or laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. Vivian's actions felt deliberate. Grace's attempts to address the issue with Daniel were met with confusion. "She's just trying to be nice, Grace," Daniel said one evening when Grace voiced her concerns. Maybe this is her way of making up for the past. Grace wanted to believe him, but her instincts screamed otherwise. One afternoon, while cleaning the guest house, Grace stumbled upon a notebook in Vivian's belongings. Curiosity got the better of her, and she flipped through the pages. What she found left her shaken. Pages filled with notes about Daniel, his likes, dislikes, habits, and even his schedule. Grace's hands trembled as she realized her stepmother's interest in her husband was far from innocent. Determined to protect her marriage, Grace confronted Vivian that evening. "What is this?" she demanded, holding up the notebook. Vivian's eyes widened, but she quickly recovered, offering a sly smile. "Oh, darling, you're overreacting," Vivian said smoothly. "I was just trying to get to know Daniel better. Isn't that what family does?" Grace knew better than to believe her. Vivian's actions were crossing a line, and Grace vowed to uncover the truth behind her stepmother's intentions. Vivian's behavior grew bolder after Grace's confrontation. It was as though the notebook incident had emboldened her. She began dressing more provocatively around the house, wearing outfits that seemed designed to catch Daniel's eye. Grace's frustration boiled over, but she struggled to find a way to address it without sounding paranoid. One evening, as the three of them sat down for dinner, Vivian's hand lingered a moment too long on Daniel's arm as she passed him the salt. Grace's glare was sharp enough to cut glass, but Daniel seemed oblivious. "I've been thinking," Vivian announced, her tone sweet but laced with something darker. "Perhaps I should move into the main house. It would make things so much easier, don't you think?" "Absolutely not," Grace said firmly before Daniel could respond. "The guest house is perfectly fine for you." Vivian's smile didn't falter, but the glint in her eyes betrayed her anger. Grace knew she had won this battle, but the war was far from over. She needed a plan to expose Vivian's true intentions before it was too late. The days that followed were filled with tension. Grace found herself watching Vivian's every move, searching for a way to unmask her stepmother's duplicity. Meanwhile, Vivian continued her charm offensive, maintaining a facade of sweetness around Daniel and carefully avoiding direct confrontations with Grace. One morning, Grace decided to confide in her best friend Lisa. Over coffee, she poured out the details of Vivian's behavior and the notebook she had discovered. Lisa, ever practical, suggested hiring a private investigator. "If she's up to something, you need evidence," Lisa said. Confronting her without proof might backfire. Grace hesitated but knew Lisa was right. She couldn't risk Vivian twisting the situation to make her look paranoid. That evening, while Daniel worked late, Grace contacted a discreet investigator recommended by Lisa. Together, they devised a plan to monitor Vivian's activities without raising suspicion. Within days, the investigator uncovered troubling details. Vivian had been frequenting upscale boutiques and restaurants, often in the company of an unidentified man. More alarmingly, she had been making inquiries about Daniel's financial assets. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, and Grace's determination to protect her marriage solidified. Grace decided to confront Vivian once more, but this time, she would be armed with undeniable proof. The stakes had never been higher, and Grace knew she had to act swiftly before Vivian's schemes caused irreparable damage. Grace waited for the perfect moment to confront Vivian, her heart pounding with anticipation and dread. She chose an evening when Daniel was out with friends, ensuring they wouldn't be interrupted. Armed with the investigator's report and a steely resolve, Grace marched to the guest house. Vivian greeted her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Grace, what a surprise. To what do I owe the pleasure?" Grace didn't waste time on pleasantries. She placed the report on the table, her gaze unwavering. "Care to explain this?" Vivian's expression faltered as she flipped through the pages. For a moment, she seemed genuinely stunned, but the glint of cunning quickly returned to her eyes. "You've been spying on me," she accused, her voice dripping with indignation. "Don't play the victim," Grace shot back. "You've been digging into Daniel's finances and meeting strange men. What are you planning, Vivian?" Vivian's smile turned cold. "You always did underestimate me, Grace. But let's just say I have my reasons." Grace's blood ran cold at the veiled threat. She realized Vivian wasn't just a manipulative nuisance. She was dangerous. Grace knew she had to protect Daniel, but she also understood that Vivian wouldn't back down without a fight. The battle lines were drawn, and Grace prepared herself for the storm to come. Vivian's demeanor changed after Grace's confrontation. She no longer tried to hide her actions behind a veneer of politeness. Instead, she became openly defiant, making it clear she had no intention of leaving. "You think you've won because you've caught a glimpse of the game," Vivian sneered during one heated exchange. "But you're still far from understanding the rules." Grace felt the weight of those words, but refused to be intimidated. She doubled her efforts to shield Daniel from Vivian's manipulations. However, Vivian's schemes were growing more intricate. Mysterious phone calls and strange deliveries to the guest house hinted at a larger plan in motion. Meanwhile, Daniel began to notice the tension. "Is everything okay?" he asked one evening, sensing Grace's unease. Grace hesitated. She didn't want to burden him, but knew he deserved the truth. "It's Vivian," she admitted. "I think she's plotting something that could hurt us." Daniel looked troubled, but not entirely convinced. "She's difficult, yes, but plotting? That seems a bit extreme." Grace realized she needed concrete evidence to open Daniel's eyes. With the investigator's help, she continued to uncover pieces of Vivian's plan, determined to expose her stepmother's true intentions before it was too late. Each new revelation only added to the growing sense of dread, as Grace realized Vivian's schemes were more dangerous than she had ever imagined. The tension in the house reached a boiling point as Grace's investigation uncovered a shocking revelation. Vivian had forged Daniel's signature on documents related to a joint business venture. The scheme would have tied him to a fraudulent deal that could ruin his career and finances. Armed with this damning evidence, Grace realized she had the upper hand, but exposing Vivian would require Daniel's cooperation. She decided it was time to lay everything bare. One evening, she sat Daniel down and revealed the full extent of Vivian's actions, including the forged documents and the investigators' findings. Daniel's reaction was a mix of disbelief and anger. "I trusted her," he said, his voice trembling. "How could she do this?" Grace placed a comforting hand on his. "We'll get through this together, but we need to act fast before she does more damage." Together, they formulated a plan to confront Vivian and gather additional evidence to protect themselves legally. Grace felt a surge of relief, knowing Daniel was finally on her side. The turning point had arrived, and Grace was determined to reclaim their peace, no matter the cost. But Vivian was not one to back down easily. As the couple prepared to confront her, they couldn't shake the feeling that the worst was yet to come. Vivian sensed a shift in Daniel and Grace's behavior. She noticed their hushed conversations and the way Grace seemed more confident, more assertive. It didn't take long for her to realize that Grace had finally turned Daniel against her. Panic began to creep in, but Vivian wasn't about to lose her footing without a fight. She devised a desperate plan, one that could either secure her position or destroy everything she had worked for. One evening, as Daniel arrived home from work, Vivian cornered him in the hallway. Her eyes were glassy with fake tears, and her voice trembled as she spoke. "Daniel, I need to tell you something Grace has been hiding from you, behavior, and begging for forgiveness. I've been selfish and foolish," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I just want to be part of this family." Daniel looked at Grace, unsure how to respond. Grace, however, saw through the act. "Vivian, your words mean nothing without actions. If you truly want forgiveness, you'll have to prove it by coming clean." Vivian hesitated, her eyes darting between Grace and Daniel. Then she burst into laughter, the tears vanishing in an instant. "Oh, Grace, you always were the dramatic one. Do you really think you've won?" Her mask of vulnerability shattered. Vivian revealed a chilling side of her personality, leaving both Grace and Daniel stunned. Grace knew they were closer than ever to bringing Vivian's schemes to an end, but it was clear her stepmother wouldn't go down without a fight. Determined to end Vivian's reign of manipulation, Grace and Daniel devised a plan to confront her with the evidence while ensuring their safety. They scheduled a meeting with their lawyer to discuss the fraudulent documents and Vivian's financial activities. But before they could act, Vivian escalated her tactics. That night, she set fire to the investigator's car, sending a clear message. Grace and Daniel woke to the news, realizing just how far Vivian was willing to go. "She's unhinged," Grace said, her voice trembling. "We need to act now." That evening, Grace confronted Vivian in the guest house, Daniel by her side. "We know what you've done," Grace began, holding up a folder of evidence. "And we have enough to ensure you face the consequences." Vivian's face twisted into a smirk. "You think you can intimidate me? You've underestimated me from the start." "Not this time," Daniel said firmly, stepping forward. "You've hurt this family for the last time, Vivian. It's over." For the first time, a flicker of fear crossed Vivian's face. Grace and Daniel had turned the tide, but as they left the guest house that night, Grace couldn't shake the feeling that Vivian wasn't finished yet. Meeting with an old acquaintance who specialized in covering tracks and fixing delicate situations, Vivian knew she was running out of options. If she could destroy the evidence Grace and Daniel had gathered, she might still have a chance to regain control. Meanwhile, Grace's instincts told her Vivian was planning something drastic. To stay ahead, she coordinated with the investigator to monitor Vivian's activities closely. The investigator uncovered troubling signs. Vivian had made inquiries about fake alibis and was attempting to bribe people who could provide her an escape route. The tension in the household was palpable. Vivian tried to act as though nothing was amiss, but her nervous energy betrayed her. Daniel, once hesitant, was now fully aligned with Grace, and their resolve to end Vivian's manipulations grew stronger by the day. That evening, as the family sat down for dinner, Vivian made a bold move. She announced tearfully, I've decided to leave tomorrow. Clearly, I've been a burden to you both." Her voice quivered, but her eyes darted sharply to Grace, daring her to challenge the statement. Grace wasn't fooled. "If you're truly leaving, I'll help you pack," she said with a calm but firm tone. Daniel nodded in agreement. "It's best for all of us, Vivian." Vivian's smile wavered. She wasn't ready to let go. And as the evening progressed, her desperation turned into a dangerous resolve. She had one final card to play. A move so reckless it could either solidify her place in Daniel's life or bring about her ultimate downfall. Would Grace and Daniel be prepared for the storm Vivian was about to unleash? The stakes had never been higher.